When we talk about acting strong, what we're really talking about is the mask. It's that layer you put on when you walk into the world. When you go to work, when you sit across from someone and they ask you how you're doing, and you answer with the automatic, "I'm fine," but inside you're not fine. Inside you're breaking, or at least you're carrying more weight than anyone can see. Yet you act as if none of it touches you, as if you are made of steel. That mask of strength is something we all wear. It isn't just personal. It's cultural. It's almost demanded of us. From childhood, many of us are taught to keep composure, to swallow tears, to hold the face together, even when the inside is crumbling. Be strong, we're told. And strength, in that shallow sense, comes to mean silence about pain, endurance without expression, smiling when the heart is exhausted. Now, on the surface, that sounds like discipline, and discipline is necessary, but what happens when the mask becomes so heavy that it disconnects you from yourself? That's where the problem begins. You see, there's a profound psychological truth here. Human beings are creatures of signals, of communication, far deeper than words. You can tell yourself to act strong. You can command your voice to sound confident, but the eyes, they don't obey the mask. They reflect the truth. They reveal exhaustion, sorrow, or longing in ways the body cannot completely suppress. That's why people can look at you, and even if you're smiling, they'll say, "Are you okay?" They've caught that flicker, that micro expression, that split second where the truth leaks through. And that's what the title of this speech points to. You can act strong, but damn, the eyes can't lie. Now why do we cling to the mask so desperately? On one level, it's survival. If you were to walk into every room with your raw pain exposed, you'd be vulnerable to those who might exploit it. Life is competitive. Society respects composure. And so we harden ourselves because we know instinctively that to break down in the wrong place at the wrong time is to risk shame or rejection. There's wisdom in restraint. There's necessity in it. But here's the danger. If your entire identity becomes the mask, then you lose access to your own humanity. When you never let anyone see you hurt, you start to forget how to acknowledge it yourself. And then what happens? You suffer in silence, and the silence compounds the suffering. That mask that once protected you slowly imprisons you. You become, in a very real sense, invisible to others, untouchable, unreachable. People may admire your strength, but they don't really know you. They only know the mask. And when that happens, life becomes terribly lonely. There's also a moral cost. If you're constantly signaling to the world that you're fine, when you're not, you inadvertently contribute to the culture of silence around suffering. Others look at you, see the performance, and conclude, well, everyone else seems to be holding it together. Maybe I'm the only one struggling. And so they too keep their pain hidden. This creates an echo chamber of false strength where everyone is pretending and no one is healing. And that's a tragedy because it keeps us disconnected at the very moments we most need connection. Think about this. The greatest human bonds are formed not in shared perfection, but in shared vulnerability. The friendships and loves that endure are not the ones where we only showed our best sides, but where we risked showing the cracks and the other person said, "I see you, and I'm still here." That is what dissolves the mask. That is what turns strength from an act into a reality. But to get there, you must first admit to yourself that acting strong is not the same as being strong. Real strength is not the absence of visible struggle. Real strength is the capacity to face your struggle honestly, to integrate it into your identity, and to carry it forward without denying it. It's the paradox of strength. The more you try to hide weakness, the weaker you become. The more you acknowledge weakness, the stronger you grow. So yes, you can act strong. And sometimes you must. Life requires composure in the face of chaos. But if that's all you do, if you reduce yourself to the mask, then your eyes will betray you. Your soul will ache for connection, and you'll find yourself surrounded by people who admire your facade, but don't know your truth. And at the end of the day, being admired is never enough. What the soul longs for is to be known. And here's the thing worth remembering. If your eyes can't lie, then stop asking them to. Let them speak. Let them carry the truth your mask cannot. Because maybe, just maybe, when someone finally sees that truth in your eyes, they'll respond not with judgment, but with the kind of compassion that reminds you, you don't have to carry the weight alone. That's the choice we face. Live as the mask or live as the human being behind it. And if you want a life that's more than performance, you'll have to risk the latter. So let me put it simply, the world doesn't need your act. It needs your eyes, unguarded, telling the truth. When you think about it, the eyes are the most honest part of the human body. They're windows that refuse to obey the script. We try so hard to follow. We can force a smile. We can train our voices to sound cheerful. We can hold our shoulders upright and walk like nothing touches us. But the eyes are storytellers that never quite stick to the narrative. They reveal fear, sorrow, longing, even love without permission. And people notice, sometimes consciously, often unconsciously. Why is that? Because human beings are biologically wired to read faces, to track the subtlest changes in expression, look for the truth beneath appearances. It's an ancient survival mechanism. Long before language, we relied on the ability to sense whether someone was angry, afraid, or trustworthy simply by looking at their face. The eyes especially became a focal point because they change with emotion in ways that are nearly impossible to fake. Pupils dilate with interest, shrink with fear. The muscles around the eyes tighten when we're anxious, soften when we feel safe. That's why even a so-called poker face fails. The mask may cover, but the eyes leak. And here's where it becomes psychologically profound. You cannot lie to yourself without your body revealing it. You might convince your mind to play the role of strength, but your nervous system doesn't participate in the fiction. The trembling eyelid, the vacant stare, the flicker of sadness, that's your inner truth, demanding to be seen. And that's why people say the eyes are the mirror of the soul. Not because of poetry, but because of biology and psychology working together. Now some people understand this intuitively and they avoid eye contact when they're hiding something. They know, perhaps unconsciously, that their eyes will give them away. But even that avoidance speaks louder than words. Think about the last time you asked someone how they were, and they looked away quickly as they answered, "I'm fine." You didn't believe them, did you? Because the eyes told a different story. This is the paradox of acting strong. The more you try to convince others that you're unshaken, the more your eyes broadcast the tremor of what you're carrying. And here's the danger. when your eyes and your words are in conflict, it creates distrust. People sense the dissonance. Even if they can't name it, they feel it. And in that moment, your attempt to look strong can actually make you seem fragile, even dishonest. Because truth is attractive to the human mind, and contradiction repels it. That's why you're drawn to people whose eyes align with their words. There's something magnetic about them because they're integrated. They're not at war with themselves. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine someone who has spent years wearing the mask. Their eyes are tired from the effort of pretending. They've perfected the performance, but deep down they know everyone who looks closely can see through it. This produces an almost, because the very thing you're trying to hide becomes the thing you can't control. And then you end up more guarded, more tense, more afraid of being seen. That is the spiral of self-betrayal. But there's also hope here, because if the eyes always tell the truth, then maybe we should stop resisting that fact and start embracing it. Think about the courage it takes to let your eyes say what your words are afraid to look at someone and allow them to see the pain or the fatigue or the longing you've buried. That is vulnerability, but it is also the beginning of real connection. Because when someone sees your eyes and recognizes their own pain reflected back, something powerful happens. The distance between you dissolves. The mask becomes unnecessary. And for once, you don't have to act, you just are. It's worth asking yourself, how often do you really look into someone's eyes? Not just glance at them, but really look. And how often do you allow others to look into yours? In a world saturated with screens, distractions, and surface-level exchanges, eye contact has become almost rare. But when it happens, it can be life-changing because it communicates something that words rarely capture. I see you, I know you, and I accept what I see. Philosophically, this is what makes the human encounter sacred. It's not the rehearsed conversations or the polished image. It's that unguarded moment when your soul slips through your eyes and meets another soul doing the same. That's why lovers can sit in silence, staring at each other, and feel more intimacy than hours of talk could provide. No, that's why a child can look at their parents' eyes and instantly know whether they're safe or in danger. That's why, even in your loneliest moments, when someone looks into your eyes with compassion, you feel less alone. So when you act strong but your eyes reveal otherwise, maybe that's not failure. Maybe that's the truth doing its necessary work. Maybe it's your humanity refusing to be suffocated by the mask. And perhaps that's not something to fear. It's something to trust. Because if your eyes can tell the truth, they can also be the doorway to healing. Now, let me leave you with this. The eyes are the one place in the human body that refuse to lie. You can resent that, or you can embrace it. But if you choose to embrace it, you might find that what you've been hiding in, shame, is exactly what someone else has been waiting to recognize. And in that recognition, both of you become stronger. Not by pretending, but by finally telling the truth. Here's the strange thing about pretending to be strong. The performance doesn't just fool other people. It starts to fool you too. You begin to confuse the image you're projecting with the person you actually are. And this is where the real battle begins, between the self you want to present to the world and the self that's crying out underneath. Psychologists often talk about the persona. It's the mask we wear to interact with society. In many ways, it's necessary. You can't walk into your workplace and unload every insecurity, every fear, every grief. Life requires a certain composure. That's fine. But when the persona becomes not just a role, but your identity, when it begins to dominate and silence the deeper parts of you, then you're in trouble, because now instead of living authentically, you're living in a performance. And the longer you play that role, the more alienated you become from your real self. This alienation carries a cost. It breeds exhaustion. Think about it. To constantly monitor your expressions, your tone, your posture, to ensure the mask doesn't slip, this takes energy. It's the energy of hypervigilance, of living as if every interaction is an audition. And what happens when you do that for months, years, even decades? You burn out, not just physically, but spiritually. You wake up one day and wonder who you even are beneath the costume. But it doesn't stop there. The dissonance between the image and the reality creates anxiety, because deep down, you know that if someone looks too closely, they catch the flicker in your eyes or the crack in your voice, the truth will spill out. And so you live with the constant fear of being exposed. That's what makes the performance so fragile. The stronger the mask, the weaker the foundation beneath it becomes, because the act was never built to withstand real scrutiny. Now you might ask, why do we do this to ourselves? Why not just drop the act? The answer is both simple and tragic, because we believe we must. Society praises resilience, confidence, composure. We've been told that weakness is shameful, that tears are embarrassing, that vulnerability makes us targets. So we carry that belief into adulthood and build elaborate defenses to keep our wounds invisible. But here's the paradox. In trying so hard to appear strong, we often make ourselves weaker, because the person who can't acknowledge their wounds is also the person who can't heal them. There's another layer too, relationships. When your image and your reality are in conflict, intimacy becomes almost impossible, because intimacy requires honesty. If you're always performing strength, then no one truly knows you. They only know the mask, and so you remain alone, even in the presence of others. This is why so many people feel an aching loneliness in crowded rooms. They're surrounded by people, but utterly unseen, because they've hidden their true selves so deeply that no one can reach them. And here lies a deeper philosophical question. What kind of life are you living if it's primarily an act? Is it even your life, or is it just a projection designed to win approval? That's the tragedy of living only through the mask. You forfeit authenticity for acceptance, and yet acceptance without people might admire the performance, but deep down, they're applauding a character, not you. But let's not forget, this battle between image and reality isn't just a weakness. It's also an opportunity, because conflict often signals growth. The tension you feel when the mask no longer fits is a call to change. It's your deeper self knocking on the door saying, enough. Stop pretending. It's time to be real. And that's terrifying, but it's also liberating, because if you have the courage to listen, you'll begin to reclaim the parts of you that have been silenced. And think about this. What kind of strength do you actually admire in others? Is it the person who never cracks, who never shows pain? Or is it the person who has clearly suffered, clearly struggled, and yet continues forward with honesty and dignity. We admire the latter because it's human. We know deep down that the act of pretending isn't courage, it's fear. True strength is found in integration in the alignment between the inner reality and the outer image. So the battle between image and reality is not something to avoid, but something to confront, because the mask will eventually crack. The question is whether you let it shatter in a crisis, or whether you remove it deliberately with courage and begin to live as a whole person again. And that's the choice every one of us faces. Continue exhausting ourselves in the performance or risk honesty. And here's the truth. People can forgive your vulnerability, but they rarely forgive an authenticity. They may not like everything about your reality, but they will respect that it's real. And respect is the foundation of trust. And trust is the foundation of love. And love, real love, can only exist where there's no mask between two people. Okay? So the eyes that betray you, the exhaustion you feel from pretending, the loneliness of being unseen, these are not signs of failure. They are signs that the deeper self is still alive, still knocking, still waiting for you to let it out. And if you answer, if you dare to close the gap between image and reality, you will discover that strength isn't found in the mask at all. It's found in the courage to live without one. Let me put it simply, pretending to be strong is a performance. Becoming strong is a transformation. And that transformation begins the moment you decide to stop hiding. Here's the thing, if the mask of strength drains us, if the inner battle between the image and the reality eats at our soul, then what's the alternative? We're left with something most people instinctively run from: vulnerability. And I want to suggest something that sounds almost paradoxical, that vulnerability is not weakness at all. In fact, it may be the only path to real strength. Now think about the way we've been conditioned. From childhood, many of us are told not to cry, not to show too much emotion, not to let people see when we're hurt. And the logic behind that is clear enough. If you expose weakness, people might exploit it. So the instinct becomes hide it, lock it away, act like you're unshaken. But here's the psychological trap. You can hide pain from the world, but you can't hide it from yourself. It doesn't vanish just because you push it down. It festers. It takes on different shapes: an anxiety, bitterness, anger, isolation. And in the attempt to appear untouchable, you end up becoming more fragile. The counterintuitive truth is that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength. It's the foundation of it. Because vulnerability requires to reveal that you're afraid, to admit that you're hurting, to let someone see the truth in your eyes. That takes more bravery than hiding ever will. Anyone can wear a mask, but to step into the world without one exposed and authentic, that's something extraordinary. Think about the relationships that matter most to you. They didn't become meaningful because both people were perfect, polished, and endlessly composed. They became meaningful because at some point, somebody dared to say, this is what I'm afraid of. This is what hurts me. This is what I can't carry alone. And the other person didn't run away. That's where trust is born. That's where intimacy deepens. That's where love becomes more than an illusion. Now there's a deeper philosophical layer here. Vulnerability is a reminder that we are finite, limited beings. We are not gods. We are not invincible machines. And when we try to play that game, when we pretend we're untouchable, we sever ourselves from reality. Vulnerability is the acknowledgement of reality. It says, yes, I can be hurt. Yes, I bleed. Yes, I fall apart. Sometimes. That's not an admission of failure. It's an admission of humanity. And there's tremendous strength in aligning yourself with reality instead of denying it. But I can already hear the objection. What if people use my vulnerability against me? And the truth is, some will. That's inevitable. There are people who will exploit openness, who will mistake honesty for weakness. But here's the paradox. Again, you don't need the approval of everyone. You don't need the trust of the entire world. You need a few people, true people, who see you as you are and stay anyway. And you'll never find those people if you never take the risk of being seen. So vulnerability is selective. It's not about pouring your soul out to everyone indiscriminately. It's about having the courage to let your guard down with the right people, in the right places. And those moments, those exchanges of honesty, create the bonds that actually sustain us, because no one survives this life alone. We all need allies, companions, people who know what we're really carrying, and those bonds are only forged in the fire of vulnerability. There's also something profoundly liberating about it. When you drop the act, when you stop wasting energy on maintaining the mask, you find yourself lighter, you can breathe again, and you realize that half of the burden wasn't the pain itself, but the effort of hiding it. Vulnerability frees you from that prison. It lets your inner reality align with your outer expression. And once those two are aligned, you discover a form of strength that isn't brittle, but flexible, because it's built on truth, not illusion. And there's another thing worth saying. Vulnerability doesn't just connect you to others, it connects you to yourself. If you never allow yourself to feel sadness, grief, or fear, then you also blunt your capacity for joy, love, and wonder. Numbness is never selective. You can't anesthetize pain without also anesthetizing everything else. Vulnerability reopens those channels. It makes you fully alive again, capable of the full range of human experience. That's not weakness. That's wholeness. So when the eyes betray you, when they reveal the cracks in your armor, maybe that's not something to be ashamed of. Maybe that's your soul's way of saying, stop hiding, stop pretending, let someone see you. Because the truth is, most people are starving for that kind of authenticity. They're tired of facades, tired of surface level interactions. And when you dare to show up vulnerable, you give others permission to do the same. Vulnerability is contagious. And in a culture obsessed with strength as domination and control, that kind of honesty is revolutionary. Let me leave you with this. There's no real courage without vulnerability. You cannot be brave without first being afraid. You cannot be strong without first being broken. To deny vulnerability is to deny your own humanity. But to embrace it, to stand there, eyes unguarded, heart exposed, and still move forward, that is strength of the highest order. So the next time you feel the urge to hide behind the mask, remember this. The act might protect you for a moment, but it will imprison you for a lifetime. Vulnerability might cost you in the short term, but it will set you free in the long run, and freedom, that's worth everything. There comes a point when you realize that pretending to be strong, holding back vulnerability, and living in that tension between the mask and the truth it's not sustainable. You can't live your whole life as a performance. At some point, the performance has to end, and what's left is who you really are. And here's the uncomfortable reality. The longer you keep acting, the harder it is to remember who that person even is. The lines blur, and you begin to confuse the mask with the self, but that's where the process of becoming whole begins. It's the movement away from fragmentation, the split between appearance and reality, toward integration. And integration means this: what I feel inside and what I show on the outside start to align. My words match my eyes match my heart. And when that alignment happens, the weight lifts. You're no longer at war with yourself. This isn't easy, because becoming whole, again, requires a kind of radical honesty. It means admitting, first to yourself, I am not as strong as I pretend to be. And that admission is terrifying, because it feels like a collapse. It feels like defeat. But in truth, it's the beginning of a deeper kind of strength, because it's grounded in reality rather than illusion. You cannot build genuine strength on a foundation of lies. Even lies, you tell yourself, you can only build it on truth. Now think about how wholeness shows up in daily life. When someone who's integrated walks into a room, you can feel it. They're not posturing, not overcompensating, not trying to convince you of who they are. Their presence has a kind of gravity to it. They're comfortable in their skin. And that comfort is not the result of avoiding weakness, but of facing it, embracing it, and moving through it. They've learned that wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means coherence. One of the great dangers of our time is that so many people are fragmented. They curate their strength for public display, but privately they're collapsing. And the culture encourages it, telling us that appearance is everything, that confidence is all that matters, that weakness must be hidden at all costs. But if you follow that path long enough, you don't just lose authenticity. You lose yourself. You become a stranger in your own life. Becoming whole, again, is about reversing that trajectory. It's about peeling away the performance until what's left is real. And once you reach that place, you discover that people respond to it differently, because authenticity has power. It draws others to you. It creates relationships based not on illusion, but on truth. And those are the only relationships that last. There's also something profoundly healing about wholeness. When you live fragmented, acting strong but feeling weak, hiding pain while projecting confidence, you create constant internal friction. Your psyche becomes a battlefield. But when you move toward wholeness, that battle ceases. You stop wasting energy on the mask. You stop dividing yourself into parts. That energy can finally flow into growth, into creation, into love. And let's be clear, wholeness doesn't mean you'll never hurt again. It doesn't mean the tears vanish or the fears dissolve. It means you carry them openly, honestly, without shame. You don't hide the scars, but you also don't let them define you. You learn to integrate the brokenness into the strength. You become both, and that paradox is what makes you fully human. Philosophically, this is the path of individuation. As Carl Jung described it, the process of becoming the person you were meant to be, rather than the mask the world forced on you. It requires confrontation with the shadow, the parts of yourself you'd rather deny. But if you confront them, if you bring them into the light, They stop controlling you from the dark. Integration gives you freedom, and freedom gives you strength. So the question is, how do you move from acting strong to being strong? The answer is deceptively simple but profoundly difficult. You tell the truth. You tell the truth to yourself first. You let your eyes and your words say the same thing. You practice vulnerability with the people you trust. You let go of the obsession with appearing flawless and instead aim to be real. And you repeat that process day after day until the mask falls away and there's nothing left to hide. When that happens, you discover that strength isn't about being untouchable. It's about being authentic in a world that constantly pressures you to be otherwise. It's about showing up, eyes unguarded, heart steady, saying, "This is who I am, imperfect, vulnerable, but whole." That's strength, and it's the kind of strength that endures because it's not borrowed from illusion. It's built on truth. So here's the final challenge. Stop performing. Stop pretending that your eyes don't already betray you. Instead, let them speak. Let them align with your voice, your words, your life. Because the world doesn't need another mask. The world needs more people who are whole people whose strength is real because it comes from honesty, not pretense. And if you can do that, if you can drop the act and live aligned, you won't just heal yourself. You'll give others permission to do the same, and that ripple might be the very thing that changes the world. So remember this, pretending will exhaust you, but truth will set you free. Choose freedom, choose wholeness, choose to let your eyes tell the story your soul has always wanted to live.